good morning, and my name is Heather Jameson. I am the STEM lead here with the Montana After School Alliance. And today we have Corey who's presenting with us, and she's going to be sharing a little bit about Montana Wild and also some activities that you guys could take back and use with your students.
Like Heather said, my name is Corey. I'm the program specialist here at Montana Wild in Helena. So a pretty awesome spot to work. It is the only designated education center for fish, wildlife, and parks. Of course, we're doing great education across the state at our state parks and even our regional offices, but we're sort of the big education center for the state. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do here and what we can offer you for resources. And then I'll save some time at the end to go over some ready to go activities for you. And I'll send lots of good info your way, some resources and things you can utilize with your students as well. Feel free to pipe in at any point. I'm not offended at all by that. So I'll leave some chunks for questions too. But yeah, pipe in whenever you need. I don't know if I can see the chat. So Heather, if anyone chats a question, just let me know. Okay, so let's see if I can change the slide here. There we go. So what is Montana Wild? So like I said, it's Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Education Center. So we are, state run. We're funded mostly by hunting and fishing license dollars. We're super fortunate in that we're situated on this beautiful 5-acre property right by Spring Meadow Lake State Park. So we utilize that a lot in our programs, which you'll kind of see. But yeah, we couldn't ask for a better location to get students outside. And we have a pretty awesome indoor facility as well. So inside the exhibit hall, an absolutely incredible display. We have hundreds of wildlife mounts. So an opportunity for folks to get really up close to a lot of native Montana species, that you certainly couldn't or shouldn't get up close to out in the wild. We have native fish tanks, a lot of really interactive pieces to our exhibit hall, as you can see kids interacting with here. So when folks do come for a field trip, I always suggest you incorporate just a little bit of time in the schedule, or we can incorporate for you just some time to look around the exhibit hall, because it really is quite a cool experience. So we also have, as part of our area here, our grounds, we have a wildlife rehabilitation center. It's really unique in that we're one of the only state-run wildlife rehab centers in the country. So we take in injured and orphaned animals from across the state, we rehab them, and then the goal is always to release them back out into the wild. So we take mostly birds, but we have a fairly complex intake policy, but we can take in bears that are under a year. We can take in mountain lions and bobcats under a year. No rabies species, no hooved animals because of diseases. But again, mostly birds. And then we do have about 15 raptors, so birds of prey like hawks and owls, that cannot be released because of their injuries. And so they live here with us full time, and we do education programs with them. So as far as if you are able to come here for an in-person field trip, they're super fun, super engaging, and we do those for 4th through 12th grade. So that's when this place was funded and opened by the state. That's sort of what we were mandated to do these programs for, as far as field trips. Now we do have some options. If you have younger students, reach out to me if you want to bring folks under 4th grade, because there are some ways we can still get you out here and do some programming. Just requires a little more pre-work, but we can chat about that if you need to. So a typical day here. So schools usually come for 3 to 4 hours and rotate through 3 to 4 stations. They're about an hour each, our programs. We try to divide students into groups of 20 or less, just for the most effective, one-on-one kind of programming, especially if we're doing something like fishing or birding. Really any more than 10 or 15 kids, you're not going to see many birds, right? So we definitely try to break up groups into smaller portions. We have a max of 60 students here at once, and that's just because if there was inclement weather, that's the max we could fit inside the building. But Yeah, so 60 at once, and most of our programs are conducted outdoors, of course. So if you do end up coming for a field trip, of course, closed-toed shoes and proper clothing are a must. But here's kind of an example of what it looks like when a school comes here. So this was a schedule from Cayuse Prairie, who came this fall. They came for a few hours, brought 36 kids. We broke them up into 3 groups, and they rotated through archery, a bird survey, and AIS inspector, which stands for Aquatic Invasive Species Inspector. So kind of a fun program where students are acting like they're at a check station for boats, and they're trying to find all the weeds and things on boats and paddles and life jackets. So super fun day of learning, as you can see. And just to kind of cover some of the programs that we offer, this is all detailed greatly on our website, so feel free to check that out. But some of the programs we offer: Meet the Mammals. So we go over different mammal families and sort of their similarities and differences and adaptations. The Science Behind Wildlife Management. So we go a little bit more into research techniques, data collection, all that good kind of STEM stuff with this program. A mark recapture survey. This is always a favorite. So students are acting like fisheries biologists, using beans as sort of a model for fish in a river. They're sampling the river for beans or fish, marking them, putting them back, recapturing them, and then we do some math to figure out an estimation of their population. So kind of a cool program that shows a real method that our biologists do use within this agency. And then science field investigation. So very much hands-on, outside learning with these guys. A bird survey, which I'll go a little more in depth in at the end, and then macroinvertebrate studies. So digging in the water, looking for little critters in the muck and the weeds. Always a favorite, of course, to get wet and dirty down at the lake. And then living with wildlife. So teachers can pick if they'd like to focus on bears, wolves, mountain lions, or we have a new program called Keeping Wildlife Wild that focuses, as our populations are growing in Montana, how we can keep wildlife wild, keep that safe distance, and do our best not to harm animals or be harmed by animals. 2 other favorites, of course, are more sort of recreation-based programs: archery and fishing. So we have a lot of fun down at the lake. Both these gals caught their first fish ever on their field trip here. So it's always a fun moment to witness. And then raptors, of course, everybody loves a raptor program with our live birds. This right here is a long-eared owl, one of our resident birds that lives here at the center. And again, all on our website, but there's tons more. We have Montana fish, fish dissections, reptiles and amphibians with some live critters we have here at the center, bats of Montana, that AIS inspector program. And then, like I said, I always recommend incorporating a scavenger hunt, some time just to look around the exhibit hall. I do want to mention too, we have a transportation and lodging grant. So we're able to reimburse up to $2,500 of transportation and lodging costs. So schools can apply, again, if they're 4th through 12th grade. You have to be a minimum of 50 miles one way from Helena for transportation reimbursement, and 150 miles one way away for lodging reimbursement. We are out of funding for this school year, but the grant for next year, so funds that can be used from August until June of next year, that application will become available on our website in April. And again, if you go to our website, there's more information about what exactly we can reimburse, how to apply, what information we'll need, and that sort of thing.
We had a quick question come in about funds. Kathy would like to know if they could be used for nonprofit after-school programs.
That's a great question. So I would say definitely reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. I know we've done it before I'm trying to think of the program in Livingston. But it's like sort of an after school program, and we've been able to do it before. It's just something that I might have to run by my supervisor and make sure it all works out, but yes, there's definitely a possibility for that. So reach out and we can chat about that. For schools that are coming from ways away, and if you want to stay in Helena, you can make it a more sort of immersive experience by doing some other field tripping while you're here. So a lot of schools will visit the Capitol. We work really closely with Montana Discovery Foundation, who's a partner of the Forest Service. So they have some really fun programs to offer outside on public lands. You can reach out to the Historical Society. They are redoing their whole huge museum here in Helena. It's going to be absolutely incredible. I can't remember when it's planned to reopen, but I mean, it's going to be awesome. So, and their education team over there is just top notch. So that would be another great thing to add to your visit. Our local land trusts can get you out on some cool lands and learning about trail maintenance and that sort of thing. Exploration Works does charge, but they're a great STEM-based museum in town as well. And then Holter Museum of Art is really kind of upping their education efforts as well. So just some suggestions. If you're going to drive all the way out here, might as well make, a whole educational experience of it. Okay, let's see. It's freezing. There we go. You're seeing where it says virtual programs now? Okay, perfect. So I did want to throw this out too in the sort of slower, quote unquote, time of year around here, when schools are a little more hesitant to, load kids up on a bus and drive over here when it could snow 2 feet tomorrow. We do offer virtual programs too. And so we can tune in with live raptors, reptiles and amphibians. We have quite a few different programs listed on our website. A really popular one is owl pellets. So we will send you owl pellets ahead of time. I'll tune in with a live owl, chat about their adaptations, and then you guys can go ahead and dissect the pellets on your own after I've sort of given my spiel on adaptations and what pellets are and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a good way to have me tune in, but then to have your own hands-on experience and not have to drive all the way to Helena. I should mention too, all of our programming is free. So coming here for a program, totally free of charge, as long as you can, find the funds to get here, and virtual programming as well, totally free. So other educational resources, I see a chat. So, the times for virtual lessons. So we can work with you on that. Just sort of just depends on our availability. But I think it did say Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that we can be a little flexible, but that's just because we do, of course, need to leave room in our schedules for in-person field trips, meetings, all that more logistical stuff too. So Tuesdays and Thursdays work best, but reach out to myself or Jeannie, our event coordinator, either of us, and we can work with you on a time. Anytime 8 to 5, really. And again, I know many of you are after school. We don't do many evening programs just because we are pretty busy 8 to 5 every day. But if we need to talk about some evening programs, again, depending on our availability, it's a possibility. So, okay. Okay, some other educational resources that I want to just point out. We have tons of videos online. We ramped this up during COVID, making a ton of videos that can hopefully really complement lessons you might already be doing. So Wildlife Wednesday is this fun series we do. We've made hundreds of them now. So there's one on just about every wildlife topic you can think of. So you can pop on and, if you're learning about hibernation with your students, we probably have a video on it. We do have a video on it. If you're learning about, food chains, all kinds of stuff. So take a look at that. And then Hooked on Fishing. Some of you might be familiar with this program. They go into, I believe, 4th or 5th grades of most of the Helena area schools and do lessons on fish. They do fish dissections and that mark recapture survey and all sorts of amazing fish related content, and they've recorded all of their lessons and put them on FWP's YouTube page. So that's a really great resource too. Even, if you could get your hands on some fish, maybe talk to your regional office, and then you guys could go through this fish dissection via YouTube video, but you could do it on your own from your classroom. So, and then just our FWP YouTube in general, tons of instructional videos on lots of different topics. There's also a literacy program. And so my supervisor, Lori Wolf, who's the education bureau chief for the agency, she has worked with teachers, several different teachers. I think she's working with a teacher out of Kalispell right now to make evaluation tools that pair with articles from Montana Outdoors. And all of your schools should get Montana Outdoors articles to your libraries, I believe. And so you could have, students read an article and then have an evaluation tool that goes with it. So it's kind of a good activity, a good way to meet literacy standards and things like that. So if you are interested in that program specifically, my Lori's email is right here, just lwolf@mt.gov. Definitely just shoot her an email, and there's been probably over 20 that have already been created, so she could send all those your way. Trunks. So trunks are a great resource. Every regional office should have at least a fur trunk. So super great trunk that has the pelts of many different Montana mammal species. And there should be an educational activity that accompanies that. So you could get it ahead of time, read through it, and then, be confident to kind of lead an activity with your class about those species. They should also have a binocular trunk, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. And then they should have a trunk on bears and bats. And then each region, just depending, might have even more trunks. We're trying to get that more organized and documented. But this is kind of where we started, was trying to get each region to at least have fur trunk, binoculars, bears, and bats. Like I know, for example, the Great Falls office has probably 20 incredible trunks. They're just super excited about that program. So they might have a trunk on anything you can imagine, really. And then one last resource I wanted to point out was these trainings that we do throughout the year. My coworker, Ryan Schmaltz, does most of these trainings. And so he will train you on using these curriculums that are from the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. Once you've taken the training, they're free, and you get this big curriculum. They're like this thick with incredible activities on wildlife, conservation, land management. Growing Up Wild specifically is for the younger students. We're having a training for Growing Up Wild here at Montana Wild in February. I believe it's February 15th. Says on our website. If you're interested, reach out to me. We can get you registered for that. But that's a great one if you work with younger students. Project Wild is slightly older students, so more that 4th through 12th grade range. But those are great trainings. Reach out to me if you're interested in setting up a training for some teachers. As long as he can guarantee, he might have 10 teachers show up, he's willing to travel and do these trainings as well. So if you can get a cohort of interested folks, he might come and do a training for you. Okay, so I know we had a few questions filter in. Do we have any questions specifically about Montana Wild before I jump into some activities? Okay, I did a good job, that means, right? Oh, I see a chat. Let's see. Not at this moment. Okay, perfect. If you think of any, just let me know. Okay. Oh, there's another chat. In the summertime, we have a higher percentage of students that participate in our summer camp that are younger than 4th grade. If your field trips on site are 4th through 8th, is there an option for anyone from Montana Wild to come to our school to display and talk about anything with our youngsters? So Katie, where are you located? Are you here in Helena? Clinton. So it just sort of depends on our availability. We don't do a ton of outreach, our staff specifically, just because we are so busy with schools coming here to the center. But if you reach out, we can see our availability. We can connect you with maybe somebody who's located close to you. So reach out and we can see what we can do. What I was going to mention, and it's a little complicated, but if teachers take the Growing Up Wild training, you can bring students under 4th grade to Montana Wild for a field trip. So it seems a little odd, but that was the way, again, we were sort of mandated to do programs, field trips for 4th through 12th grade. So this was sort of our way to say, well, here's a way we can validate having younger students come if they do this Growing Up Wild training before. And so part of the Growing Up Wild training is prepping you for your field trip here, what the students can expect. And then of course, getting you accustomed to that Growing Up Wild curriculum. So if you're able to do a Growing Up Wild training, then you can bring younger students. The other thing is you're welcome to bring younger students for more of a self-guided visit. So, we have a scavenger hunt in the exhibit hall that the students love to do. So you could bring students, have them do the scavenger hunt. The lake is right down, not a 2-minute walk from us. So you could take your students around the lake. So a lot of groups will do that where they'll bring all their students, and the younger students will kind of do more self-guided, while the older students will do a program or two with us. So again, it's a little complicated, but so yes, somebody said, I took it several years ago, so could we come? Yes, you can. We should have you on a list. We have a list of everyone who's taken that training. So yeah, if you've taken the training, you can bring students under 4th grade. Okay, awesome. If you think of more questions, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute, whatever's easiest. But I will talk about some activity ideas that you could do with students. Okay, so the first, an animal sign investigation. So this is a type of program that I think gets overlooked at a lot, or it's people think, well, you're just taking them out to look around outside. It's not, very effective. But I have found if you give your program just a little bit more of a theme or a goal, you front load a little bit with some information and have some effective follow-up conversations as well. It's such a cool opportunity to open students' eyes to a new way to interact with their environment. So even if they're just walking to school, or they're out fishing with their parents, or whatever they're doing outside, it just kind of sparks this little interest to look more closely at the world around them, and these little details that can tell them a lot about who's been where. So a few helpful things if you're going to do an animal sign investigation: photos of animal signs, which I'll talk about, and I will give to you some photos that I have. Rulers. I always just love bringing rulers. It's a way to kind of hit some of those standards for students, measuring and comparing and scaling and that sort of thing. Binoculars. Again, each of your FWP regions should have a binocular trunk. We have a couple trunks right here at Montana Wild that you're welcome to check out. So binoculars are a great addition to this type of activity. Nature journals, you could spend some time making them before you go out. And then of course, documenting, if you're measuring a track and then drawing it to scale in your nature journal, again, hitting some of those standards and just making it a little more impactful. And then field guides. There's tons of field guides out there in the world that range in content level, thickness, pricing, all that kind of stuff. This is just one that we tend to really like, but it's very in-depth. So there's some that are great for younger students as well. Okay. So I like to start this really with any age with just kind of a discussion of what animal signs are. And so again, I am going to email out, I have a nice collection of animal sign photos. And so you guys are all great educators. You could set this up however you want, but I tend to print these out and then pass them out to pairs of students, have them chat and figure out, what do you think left this animal sign? and then go around and let them share, you know, their hypothesis of what they think it is. So, you know, there's an otter slides right here, tunnels under the snow. This is where a deer was kind of bedded down, or where a deer was browsing on some twigs. And so that just, again, kind of gives that little click of like, oh, we're not just talking about tracks and animal poop, right? There's all kinds of signs that tell us animals have been there. And so this discussion is a great way to sort of front load that, get them thinking like biologists before you even head out to look for the signs. So I'll send you some of those. And then, of course, books and videos are a great way to front load as well, or to kind of wrap up a lesson too. So these are some of my favorites. Who Pooped in the Park? I'm sure lots of you have heard of that. And they've made them for like every park now, Yellowstone, Glacier. So that's always a good one. And then Stella and Roy Go Camping is a really fun one where they're hiking along and looking at tracks and getting out their field guide. So the characters are just sort of displaying some good measuring and investigating. And then again, those Wildlife Wednesday videos, we have a 3-parter on animal tracks. So if you have older students, this might be a good intro, and it goes a little more into not only like individual tracks, but gait patterns and animal trails. And, you know, with tracking, you can go down a bunch of rabbit holes. So this is a good way to go a little more in depth, are those videos if you're interested. And then go out and observe. And this is, again, where your creativity as an educator, or just kind of following your students' lead of what they're interested in. So you could bring out magnifying glasses, cameras if they have them, identify, measure, document, and then of course share your findings. So whether that's with their nature journals or just going around and sharing, but I always, you know, make sure to say that's the most important part about being a scientist. You can't just discover or learn things, you have to share it with the public or with others. So yeah, that's kind of the basic 101s of like an animal tracking lesson. And the cool thing too, if you have these students year round, if you kind of are doing it throughout the year and do it in sort of a methodical way, we are collecting data, you know, somewhat in the same way and going to the same places, then you can really watch your schoolyard or your whatever area you're in kind of change throughout the year. So that's a really fun way to frame it too, with students, winter versus spring versus summer. So okay, and then SCAT. I mean, if you want kids to be excited about a lesson, just mention animal poop and they're all over it, right? So if you have the funds, this is like one of my favorite purchases we've ever made here. It's from NASCO, which has a bunch of really cool educational materials, but it's literally just called a bucket of SCAT. And it's all these models, pretty accurate models of animal scat or animal poop. You can get really creative with this and utilize it a bunch of different ways. I've brought it to, you know, tabling events and laid out the poop and then a bunch of pictures of animals, the animals represented in the bucket, and then students, you know, have to try to match them out. So you could make a program like that. But what we like to do is have a SCAT making program. And this would be super easy and fun for you to do at any of your locations. So the way I started out is with a super simple PowerPoint. I think it's like 12 slides, if that, on SCAT. So just realizing that, you know, different herbivores versus omnivores versus carnivores, there's kind of telltale signs that help you figure out what the diet of that animal is. And then talking about, you know, looking for habitat and size and all these different clues. I will send you that PowerPoint. It has notes in it too. Again, it's pretty simple and straightforward, but just a really good intro to making the SCAT. And then again, of course, there's a video on it. So I talk about basically everything that's in this PowerPoint, and then even show an example of making the SCAT. And in my example, I go really in depth. I use a field guide to measure the SCAT to make sure I make like a really good model of the SCAT. So again, talking about that measuring and scaling and using a field guide and all these things you can incorporate. Depending on the age, you can definitely just kind of let them use their creativity a little bit more. But so you could watch this video too, if you'd rather not go through the PowerPoint. I'll send you both so you'll have them. And then the best part, making the SCAT. So this animal grossology, it's free online. If you just look it up, they have the recipe for the SCAT. They have this awesome sheet. So I will hand this sheet out to all the students to sort of use for inspiration. And then again, if you have the funds to buy the bucket of SCAT, I'll leave the rubber SCAT all over too to use as inspiration. You can see this guy made a very good model of bear SCAT right here. Something that I kind of put my own twist on it. So their recipe is just cocoa powder, oatmeal. You don't want the instant oatmeal, just like the old-fashioned oats, and then just a little bit of water. I wanted to make it a little more about diet and, you know, scientific. So I also put out craisins to be like, if they're an herbivore or a bear, or, you know, something that eats berries, they can add craisins to their SCAT. I put out noodles and kind of crunch them up to be little bones, or they could be exoskeletons, you know, if it's a fox eating a bunch of grasshoppers. So you can just go a little more in depth with that diet conversation by incorporating, oh, and I also incorporate cotton balls. So they can rip up the cotton balls, kind of twist that into the SCAT, and it can be like fur, you know, if a wolf SCAT or something like that. So you can get really creative with it, and they do an awesome job. Here's some really, really good SCAT that some students have made. Okay. So descriptive avian field investigation. So this is a basically fancy way of saying a bird survey. So we love to do bird surveys here. Again, depending on the size of your group, you may see more or less birds, and your location, of course. But if you're in a good spot, a bird survey is always a really cool program to do. And it's a really good way to collect data, analyze data. You know, another good one that would be good throughout the year to talk about migration and what birds are coming and going. And then you can hit a bunch of your standards, of course, like connections between environment and species, like planning and carrying out a experiment. So all those different standards you can like really dive in if you want, or you can just go look at birds, which is always fun. So I did want to point this out. If you do want to dive a little more in depth with hitting standards and that sort of thing, this is another free resource online by AFWA, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And it's a super long document. They have a bunch of different activities in there, but they have a great intro to like setting up a field investigation, macroinvertebrates. I don't know if they have a bird survey specifically, but all of the sort of premises of setting up the experiment are in there. And it's just a really good curriculum. So check that out if you'd like. But if you do want to do a bird survey at its most basic, all you really need are binoculars. Maybe you don't even need those. I mean, of course, they're fun, they're helpful. But binoculars, again, those trunks are at your regions. Field guides. So another thing where there's a million field guides out in the world. We love Sibley's field guide. I'll show you a really simple field guide we use in just a minute. Data sheets. I'll send you our data sheet as well. You can modify it however you'd like. But you know, we just collect species, male or female, if you can tell. And then any field notes, like if it was on a nest or flying, or and then transect, which I'll talk about too. And this is, I shouldn't even say need, but things that I would recommend if you're going to have like a really impactful bird survey. So for field guide, you know, most students don't necessarily know. We have over 400 bird species you can see here in Montana. There's no way they're going to know all those. There's no way I know all of those. So what I do is I go out and look at what birds are around, or I go on eBird, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and just figure out what are the most common birds we're seeing right now. And I make just this as my field guide for the students to carry around and look at. And so this one I think I had for my September bird survey. So some more fall species, but osprey's still sticking around. And then this was more spring or summer birds. So you see a lot of those more migratory species, and can be helpful for you too, of course, because I mean, you know, if you're not a bird expert, no big deal, but this will help you to kind of identify some of the common ones you might see as well. So at our center, we've been doing the same transect for 9 years. So that I just wanted to point this out, not that you of course have to do it, but it's kind of cool if you can get like a map of your location or your school grounds and make a transect like this and show it to the students. It's a good way to talk about experiments and variables and that sort of thing, and how, we're going to walk on the same transect, and we collect data on the way out on the transect, but not on the way back because we don't want to double count. So just kind of a good way to introduce students to setting up a good scientific experiment. But so yeah, you could make your own transect if you had the tools to do it. But yeah, so we've documented over 100 species of birds on our surveys here at Spring Meadow, which is pretty cool. And we enter all of our data into eBird. So I'm going to show you eBird in just a second. But I just wanted to point out, we have tons of background information we can send you. We have articles and videos on bird surveys and mist netting, so bird studies that our agency does that can just be kind of a good intro to why do we care, why are we going to go look at birds. Not everyone is as excited as I might be or whoever, but it's just a good way to get some buy-in of why do we care about birds. So this is some really good information. And then we have questions that accompany all these videos. So I can send you all of that. And then one of our virtual program offerings is Intro to Birding and eBird. And so if you're interested in that, if you do want to start a bird survey at your school, we can definitely tune in with your students and just point out the very basics of birding. What are we looking at? Field marks, size, habitats. We keep it fun. We'll play some bird calls and things like that. And then we'll kind of give you an intro to eBird as well. So this can be another good way to kind of front load your bird surveys if you want to tune in to a virtual program with us. Yeah, just an example of one of the slides we go over with the kids. We'll play the sounds and they have to guess which bird it is. But yeah, okay, so I'm zipping through a little bit, but I want to make sure there's time for questions. So I'm going to show you eBird quick, hopefully, if I can get it to work. Heather and I were talking about how this is always the scariest part, sharing screens, and even after all this time using Zoom. Okay. Can you see eBird here? Okay, so eBird is amazing. I would recommend just going and starting to take a look at it and all its different capabilities. You can download the app on your phone, and then when you head out on a walk or a survey with your students, you just start your bird survey. It will document where you're going, and then you just enter birds as you see them. You can identify them on there by their calls, things like that. So it's really great. You can see here we've done 454 checklists with our students at Montana Wild. What's really cool is if you have time after your survey with your students, you can come in and click on your checklists. You can enter the birds that you've observed with your students. I like to do that if we have time, because you're showing them that their data really is going into the citizen science platform that is used by biologists, by teachers, by scientists, by legislators across the whole world. So their data is going to a meaningful platform. So I think sitting down with them and entering it is really effective. And then you can go back afterwards. So this was the last one we did, was in October. It's been a while, but you can go in and see the species that you've entered. And then you can even click on each species to learn a little bit more about it. You can look at pictures, you can read about the life history, you can see the range map, learn about their migration, about similar species. So just so many cool tools. I'm sure I haven't even discovered half of the tools in eBird. But one last feature I wanted to show you is that you can explore a hot spot. So let's say Spring Meadow Lake right here at Helena. Oh, that's not in Helena. There we go. So are you seeing the map now? That's a Spring Meadow Lake right here. Okay, perfect. So you can, as an educator, pull it up, the day before your survey you can view details, and it's kind of nice because you can see what people have been seeing over the last few days. Prep yourself, so you're looking at it and you're like, what is an American tree sparrow? You can click on that, look at it, make sure you know how to ID it so you can help students ID it. And then another thing I like to point out is this is a great way to find incredible birders in your area who would maybe be willing to come with your class or to come give a lesson to your class. So for example, I know Stephen Turner, super involved in our local chapter of Audubon. He's an amazing birder, an amazing educator. So, you could do a little sleuthing, a little creeping, if you will, and maybe figure out who could come and help out and talk to your class about birds. So I know I threw a ton at you, but there's so many awesome bird resources out there. Again, I'll send a bunch of them to Heather at some point today and share them all with you. But yeah. So do you guys have any questions after all that about Montana Wild or any of those programs? Well, if you think of any, definitely let me know. Let me put our website link in the chat for everybody. And definitely from this link, you can again look at all of our public or our field trip offerings, our virtual field trip offerings, information about our grants. And then we do public programs as well. So each month we try to do about 4 public programs. So for example, this Thursday, we have an evening program about reptiles and amphibians in the winter, how they're surviving during this colder time of year. So, you can always send that out to students, or a lot of them will do hybrid. So this one on Thursday will also stream to Facebook, for example. But yeah, lots going on. So always feel free to reach out. Yeah, Katie, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a quick question about the, hold on, I was taking notes as you were going. Thanks for all this. I've been to Montana Wild. It's a great place. And so I was just hoping to get from this a lot of different things we could do with littles and bigs. And I'm going to share a lot of this with our teachers out at Clinton. And so this was super helpful. The Growing Up Wild training, do we just have to watch the website that you're going to post that for the training in February, or will that be in the MTAA monthly newsletters that we get, or where's the best way to look out for that?
So our website is a great place to look for it. Maybe I can share the screen one more time. Let's see. Okay, so I'm on our website here. This is a new website, so there's kind of a lot going on, but you can see we have our public programs, field trips, Growing Up Wild is right here. We really only schedule for a year that we give here at the center. Again, if you are located somewhere else and have a cohort of people that would show up for a training, we could potentially travel. But we always just put the next one that is scheduled right here at the top. So the next one is February 15th from 3:30 to 6:30 right here at Montana Wild. After that one, so you could check back February 20th, probably, we'll post the next one. And it's just because we're kind of being a little bit flexible with our schedules and what's going on and things like that. But yeah, so that's where you can always find it, is there on our website under Growing Up Wild.
And I'll keep in contact with Corey, and hopefully we could put those out in the newsletter, because it is a really neat training and program. And the curriculum guide has everything from different topics and units that cover how to incorporate snack time by making your own tracks and songs, and a lot of fun at getting them out and moving. So it's a great program too.
And the Growing Up Wild training is on site, right? Not a virtual deal. That would be, we would come to Helena for that.
Yes, we have done it virtually before. Again, my coworker Ryan is the one that runs that, so I'd have to just chat with him if he has a virtual one planned. I would definitely recommend in person. It's just, as we know, a lot more hands-on. We'll lay out tons of our materials, and you'll actually get a chance to try a bunch of the activities in the curriculum. But yeah, for the most part, you come here to Montana Wild and Helena to do that. Awesome. Okay, great. Well, if you think of any questions, my email, I'll type that in the chat too. It's a little confusing. I got married last summer, and so changed my name to Bowditch, but my email still says Corey.Rice. So there's my email there. If you think of any questions or I can help you with any resources, definitely feel free to reach out. Remember too that your regional offices are a really great resource. Each region has an information education officer. And so they'll be the ones that are more knowledgeable about folks within your region that can maybe come out to your school or, lead a tour or something like that within your region. So keep them in mind as well. And you can find all their information on the FWP website. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll hop back on really quick, but thank you so much, Corey, for sharing your expertise and all the resources. And we'll make sure to keep in touch to put out upcoming programs and also opportunities if we have like an in-person conference to bring you guys if there's interest to do some trainings.
Sounds
So
good.
right now I'm going to drop in a survey for the program into the chat box. So if you guys could complete that for us, it'll help give us some feedback as the Alliance of what programs you're interested in and how today's program went. So I really appreciate you taking the time to complete that. And one of the best ways to keep in touch is through our newsletter, our listserv, and we do have some upcoming programs coming up. So next Tuesday, same time, same place, we'll have Project Wet joining us, and they'll be covering a little section on snow and STEM. And then the following week, the last week of January, we'll have Glacier National Park Education Rangers joining us for an hour on that Tuesday to cover winter ecology. If you're in the Bozeman area, we'll have Exploring the Engineering Mindset in person at the Montana Science Center coming up in February, and then some other online virtual STEM events and a summit coming up in April. So we'll make sure to put those events out there. A large portion of this, my role is coming from the Million Girl Moonshot Initiative. And so we'll be having more events focused on getting STEM resources out and providing opportunities across the state of Montana for equity and inclusion in STEM. And so if you have any interest on other resources on how to incorporate STEM in your projects and your program sites, please reach out to me and we could add you to our Million Girls Moonshot listserv that has a wealth of webinars and trainings and focusing on bringing more diversity into the STEM fields and careers. So next week, we hope to see you. And if you need the registration link for that, I could send it out afterwards with Corey's materials. And I think that's all we have today. So if there's no more questions, we'd like to take a moment to thank you for joining us. This session has been recorded and we'll share that out afterwards to participants who signed up, as well as our YouTube channel so that you could rewatch it and see what resources there are, and then also link it up to the resources Corey will be sharing with us later. So thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Corey, for presenting, and we look forward to keeping in touch with everyone.